When I walked into the courtroom that morning, every whisper stopped. The sound of my old heels echoed against the marble floor, sharp and cold. My son, Ethan, stood trembling beside the defense table, his wooden crutch shaking under his weight. But when Judge Robert Morales lifted his gaze and saw me, the color drained from his face. His lips parted in disbelief before he murmured, "Mrs. Hale, why are you here?" For a moment, silence ruled the room. Clara's smug smile froze midair, her family shifting uncomfortably behind her. None of them knew the truth that once, I wasn't just a mother, I was something far more dangerous. That morning had the weight of a funeral. The sky above Chicago hung low and gray, the kind of color that makes you feel the world has forgotten sunlight. I stood beside the car, holding Ethan's arm as he adjusted his crutch. His movements were slow, cautious, not only because of the pain in his leg, but also because of the pain in his heart. Each step he took seemed to echo the years we had both fought, just to stay standing. As we climbed the courthouse steps, I could feel the stares from every direction, curious neighbors, a few reporters, and people who had nothing better to do than feast on someone else's misery. They whispered our name as if it were a scandal printed in tomorrow's paper. "It's the Hale divorce," someone murmured. "They say it's ugly." I kept my head high, clutching the old leather briefcase I hadn't touched in over 20 years. It wasn't just an object. It was a relic of the woman I used to be. Then, a sleek black car screeched to a halt behind us. The door opened, and Clara stepped out. She was radiant, in a cruel sort of way. Her emerald dress shimmered under the dull sky like a challenge to God himself. Behind her came her parents proud, smug people who wore wealth-like armor, and her brother, walking as if he owned the ground he stepped on. I saw Clara's lips curve into that cold little smirk she had perfected over the years. The same smirk she wore the night she told Ethan he was half a man. Ethan froze for a second. I saw his shoulders tighten, his fingers trembling against the crutch. "Ignore them," I whispered. He nodded, eyes fixed on the courthouse door. He didn't know that my chest was burning with every step we took. Not from anger, at least, not yet, but from heartbreak. Inside, the courtroom smelled like polished wood and paper, old justice and new money. Clara sat down at the defendant's bench, legs crossed, her red heels tapping softly, tap, 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 a rhythm of arrogance. She leaned toward her lawyer, Anna Reeves, a sharp woman with an even sharper voice. I recognized the type, all ambition, no empathy. They whispered and exchanged a quick glance at us, the kind of glance that said, "We've already won." Ethan sank into his chair, silent. His once broad shoulders looked small beneath his navy suit. He used to be so full of life, laughing loudly, working with his hands, building, fixing. But that was before the accident. It happened 2 years ago. A construction site, a storm, and a live wire that should have been shut off. The doctors said it was a miracle he survived, but miracles have a price. His legs would never be the same. I still remember the night they called me midnight, rain pounding against the window. I ran barefoot through the cold streets, the city lights blurring through my tears. When I reached the hospital, he was lying still, wrapped in white gauze like a broken doll. "Mom," he whispered, his voice thin, "don't cry." I didn't. I couldn't. I had to be strong. I promised him we would get through it together, but I didn't know that was the beginning of our downfall. At first, Clara pretended to be the devoted wife. She brought him soup, smiled politely, said all the right words. But soon the sympathy turned into disgust. I saw it in the way she looked at him when he dropped his crutch or took too long to climb the stairs. Her patience evaporated, replaced by bitterness and shame. One morning, I heard Ethan's voice calling from his room. "Clara, could you help me to the garden? Just for a few minutes?" His tone was hopeful, fragile, From the kitchen, Clara sighed loud enough for me to hear. "Margaret, I'm late for work," she snapped. "He'll have to manage on his own." The slam of the door shook the house. That day, I wheeled Ethan outside myself. He sat quietly under the old oak tree, eyes fixed on the horizon. I pretended to fuss with the flowers so he wouldn't see the tears in mine. The silence between us said everything words couldn't. As weeks passed, Clara's absence became the rule, not the exception. Late-night phone calls, new perfume, tight dresses that didn't belong in our simple home. I wanted to believe I was overthinking it. I wanted to believe my daughter-in-law wouldn't betray us. But rumors have a way of finding you even when you don't want them to. At the grocery store, an old neighbor leaned close and whispered, "Margaret, I saw Clara with a man last week. Tall, handsome, driving one of those fancy cars." They looked close. I smiled politely, pretending not to hear. But deep down, I knew. I had seen the change, the glow in Clara's face when she checked her phone, the care she suddenly put into her appearance. It wasn't guilt that she wore, it was triumph. Then came the night that changed everything. Ethan woke up in pain, his leg cramping violently. "Clara," he called softly, "could you help me?" She stood by the doorway, arms crossed. "I'm not your nurse, Ethan. Hire someone." Her words sliced through the dark like a blade. I was standing in the hall, frozen. Ethan's hand fell from the crutch, and he said nothing more. From that night, a silence settled in the house so thick, I could hear the clock ticking like a hammer against my heart. Months passed. One afternoon, Clara came home earlier than usual, not alone. A woman followed her into the kitchen, Anna Reeves, her lawyer. The same woman now sitting across from us in court. I recognized her face immediately, though it had aged into something colder. I had known her once, back in another life. "Sign here," Clara said, sliding papers across the table to Ethan. "We're getting a divorce. The house will be split in half." Ethan stared at the papers as if they were written in another language. His lips trembled. "Clara, why?" Her expression didn't change. "Because I'm done living like this. I deserve better." I stepped forward before Ethan could speak. "This house is in my son's name. It was bought before you married him." Anna's eyes flickered toward me, her tone icy. "Mrs. Hale, the law allows marital assets to be divided if both parties have shared residency. You should be careful before making legal claims." I met her gaze head on. "Trust me, Miss Reeves. I know the law better than you think." For the first time, Clara's smirk faltered. She didn't yet know what that meant. That night, I sat on the porch alone, watching the city lights fade. My old briefcase sat beside me, its leather cracked. The smell of old paper faint but familiar. I had promised myself years ago I would never touch it again. But as I stared into the darkness, I realized that promise no longer mattered. Ethan needed me. My granddaughter, Lily, needed me even more. I thought of her that night, her tiny voice whispering, "Grandma," when she couldn't sleep, her curls damp with tears. She loved her father more than anything. But I feared Clara would use her as a weapon. My fear became reality sooner than I imagined. A few days later, I overheard Clara speaking in Lily's room. "Sweetheart," Clara said sweetly. "Tomorrow at court, when the judge asks, you'll tell him you don't want to live with Daddy, right? You'll say he can't take care of you." I froze. My breath caught in my throat. Lily's voice trembled. "But Mommy, I love Daddy. I don't want to lie." Clara's tone hardened. "Do you want to lose everything? If you don't do as I say, you'll end up miserable, living with your poor grandmother and that crippled man." I pressed a hand against the wall to keep from collapsing. Every word was poison dripping into my granddaughter's ears. That night, I lay awake until dawn, listening to the city breathe beyond the window. I realized the woman who had destroyed my son's spirit was now trying to corrupt his daughter's innocence. I couldn't let that happen. I couldn't let the darkness I'd once fought in the courtroom creep into my own home. The next morning, as sunlight spilled over the kitchen table, I called Lily outside to the garden. We sat beneath the old oak tree, the same one that had watched Ethan suffer in silence. "Honey," I whispered, "I heard what your mother said. You're scared, aren't you?" Her eyes filled with tears as she nodded. "I don't want to lie, Grandma. I just want to be with Daddy." "Oh," I hugged her tightly, feeling her tiny heartbeat against my chest. "You won't have to lie. You'll tell the truth, and I'll protect you, always." As she looked up at me, a spark of courage glimmered in her eyes. In that moment, I knew the war had truly begun, and I wasn't going to lose this one. That night, after Lily had fallen asleep in my arms, I sat alone in the kitchen. The clock ticked like a countdown, and the house felt emptier than it ever had. My hands trembled slightly as I reached for the old briefcase resting on the chair beside me. The leather was worn and cracked, but the weight of it was the same as I remembered, heavy, like a secret you'd buried long ago and swore never to unearth again. When I flipped it open, the smell of old paper hit me, sharp and familiar. Inside lay yellowed notes, copies of case files, and the fading ID badge that once read Attorney Margaret Hale, Chicago District. My fingers brushed against it as if it could burn me. I had buried that part of myself after my husband's betrayal, after the scandal that had nearly cost me everything. But tonight, something inside me reawakened. Not rage, not pride, but purpose. I poured myself a cup of black coffee and began to read through the documents, reminding myself of who I used to be. My mind still worked the same way, meticulous, cold, analytical. Every lie had a thread, and every thread could be pulled. Clara thought she could manipulate the law, but she had no idea what kind of woman she was standing against. The next morning, I called an old number I hadn't dialed in decades. It rang 3 times before a gravelly voice answered, "Crane Investigations." "Thomas," I said quietly. "It's Margaret Hale." There was a pause on the other end, followed by a low whistle. "Well, I'll be damned. Haven't heard that name in 20 years. You back in the game?" "Not by choice," I replied. "I need help. Discreet help." He chuckled softly, the kind of laugh that carried both respect and disbelief. "If it's you asking, it must be something big." By afternoon, we met at a small diner off West Madison, the kind of place where secrets smell like burnt coffee. Thomas Crane looked older, heavier, but his eyes still had that restless sharpness. He slid into the booth opposite me, tipping his hat slightly. "You look the same, Margaret. Maybe a little more dangerous." I don't have time for flattery," I said, though a small smile broke through. "I need information on a woman, Clara Torres." He pulled out a small notebook, pen ready. "What are we looking for?" "Everything," I said. "Her job, her finances, who she's seeing. I want every shadow she's hiding in." Thomas nodded slowly. "You think she's cheating?" "I know she is. But I don't need proof of infidelity, Thomas. I need proof of corruption." He raised a brow. "Corruption?" "Yes. The man she's with, William Harris. Wealthy contractor. His company won several public construction bids recently. Ethan's accident happened on one of his sites." Thomas leaned back, his jaw tightening. "You think it wasn't an accident?" I met his eyes, steady. "Let's just say, coincidences have never impressed me." He scribbled notes, then looked up. "Give me 48 hours. When I returned home, Ethan was sitting at the table with Lily, helping her color inside a storybook. The sight broke me in ways I didn't expect. His hands, rough and scarred, trembled slightly as he tried to steady her crayon. She giggled when he drew outside the lines. For a brief second, I saw the man he used to be, the father, the son, the boy who used to chase fireflies in our backyard. I swallowed hard. "Ethan," I said softly. "How are you feeling?" He smiled faintly. "Better. Lily keeps me alive. She always will. I sat across from him. Listen to me, son. Tomorrow, don't let Clara or her lawyer push you. Just keep calm. Let me handle it. He frowned. Mom, this is my case. My marriage. I reached over and placed my hand over his. It's your life, Ethan, and I won't let anyone destroy it. That night, I barely slept. Every creak of the house felt like an echo from the past nights. Spent preparing cases, cross-examining witnesses in my mind, and replaying testimonies until dawn. I used to love the law. I used to believe in it. But after my husband left, after the system failed me, I walked away. Now, it wasn't faith bringing me back. It was vengeance dressed as justice. 2 days later, Thomas called. Meet me. I've got something. We met again at the diner. He laid a folder on the table, his expression grim. You were right. Clara's been seeing Harris for nearly a year. They've been careful separate accounts, burner phones, meetings at different hotels. But there's more. He flipped open the folder. William Harris has been under investigation for bribery. 2 inspectors at the city department were caught taking money from him to overlook safety violations. One of those violations was on Ethan's site, the same one where he was injured. I froze, my hands curling into fists. You're telling me Harris paid off inspectors to hide faulty wiring? Thomas nodded. And your son got caught in the mess. My breath came out slowly. Then that wasn't an accident. That was negligence. Covered by money. He nodded again. It gets worse. Clara's been transferring small amounts of money to a joint account connected to Harris's company. Looks like hush payments. I leaned back, the diner spinning slightly. Rage settled in my chest, heavy and cold. Clara hadn't just betrayed Ethan, she had helped the man responsible for destroying him. Can you get me proof? I asked. I already did. He slid a USB drive across the table. Phone records, bank transfers, security footage. Enough to make her sweat. I exhaled shakily, gripping the small drive like it was a weapon. You've just saved my son's life, Thomas. He smiled faintly. No, Margaret. You're about to do that yourself. Back home, I locked myself in my study. Hours passed as I organized the evidence, building a timeline, connecting names, dates, and money trails. My mind worked like clockwork again, ruthless, precise. The woman I'd once buried was fully awake now. The hum of the city outside faded until all I could hear was the whisper of my pen against paper. At midnight, I stopped to breathe. My reflection stared back at me from the dark window, older. Yes, but sharper too. For the first time in years, I didn't see a mother or a widow. I saw an attorney. The next day, Clara arrived at the house unannounced, her perfume filling the hall before she even spoke. Margaret, she said. Voice, sugary, sweet. I came to see Lily. She's at school, I replied coolly. Clara smiled thinly. Good. Then maybe you and I can talk about court. It doesn't have to get ugly, you know. I leaned against the doorframe, folding my arms. Ugly? You've already made it that way. Her eyes flashed. You think you can scare me with your old stories? You're nothing but a washed-up woman clinging to a crippled son. The words stung, but I didn't flinch. You're right about one thing, I said quietly. I'm old, but I know exactly how to destroy someone like you slowly, legally, and permanently. She laughed, but it was hollow. You talk big for someone who has nothing. Nothing? I stepped closer. You've mistaken silence for weakness, Clara. You'll learn soon enough that I only stay quiet when I'm sharpening my knives. Her smile faltered. Just slightly, and that was enough. She turned on her heel and left without another word. When the door closed, I finally let myself exhale. My hands were steady now. The fear was gone, replaced by something sharper conviction. That night, I placed the USB drive into my laptop and copied every file, labeling them one by one. Evidence, witness statements, financial records. Then, I printed the most damning piece, a transaction showing Clara's account receiving a $10,000 deposit from Harris Construction. As the printer hummed, I whispered to myself, "You thought you could bury us, Clara, but I know how to dig." Outside, the wind howled through the trees, and somewhere in the dark, a storm was gathering, one that I had every intention of unleashing. The morning of the hearing felt unreal. The air outside was thin, biting cold, like the world itself was holding its breath. I stood in front of the mirror, buttoning the navy suit I hadn't worn in over 20 years. It still fit maybe a little tighter around the shoulders, maybe a little looser at the waist, but it fit. My reflection looked older, yes, but there was something fierce in her eyes, something I thought I'd lost. Ethan was waiting by the door, leaning on his crutch, confusion etched across his face. "Mom, why are you dressed like that?" I smiled faintly. "Because today, son, I'm not just your mother. I'm your attorney." His eyes widened. "Mom, no you can't." "I can," I interrupted softly. "And I will. Clara's lawyer, Anna Reeves, may have a law degree, but she doesn't have what I have a reason to fight." He swallowed hard, his throat tightening. "They'll try to destroy you." I picked up my briefcase, the old leather creaking under my fingers. "They can try, but they've already underestimated me. That's their first mistake." We arrived at the courthouse early. The building loomed tall and severe against the morning sky, its pillars shadowing the steps like sentinels guarding truth itself. Reporters hovered outside, whispering, snapping photos, desperate for a headline. But I didn't care about their noise. I only cared about the silence that came just before a verdict. Inside, the air was heavy with tension. Clara sat at her table, draped in white this time, as if purity could be worn like a costume. Her lawyer, Anna Reeves, was beside her, flipping through files, whispering strategy. When they saw me walk in, both froze. Clara blinked, disbelief flashing across her face. "What is she doing here?" she hissed. Judge Morales entered just then. His robe swayed with quiet authority as he took his seat. When his eyes lifted and landed on me, his entire posture shifted. His hand paused midair, and for a brief second, his composure cracked. "Mrs. Hale," he said slowly, his voice barely above a whisper. "Why are you here?" The room fell silent. Even the court clerk stopped typing. I stood tall, my voice steady. "Your Honor, I'll be representing my son, Ethan Hale, in this matter." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Anna quickly stood, her tone sharp. "Your Honor, this is highly irregular. Mrs. Hale hasn't practiced in decades. Her license must be still active," I interrupted, holding up a folded document. "Reinstated last week." Judge Morales blinked once, then nodded with a hint of respect. "Noted. Proceed, Mrs. Hale." Clara's jaw tightened. She leaned toward her lawyer, whispering something venomous, but I didn't need to hear it. I could see the panic flickering behind her eyes, like a flame trapped in a glass jar. The opening statements began. Anna spoke first, painting Clara as the victim, a lonely woman trapped in a loveless marriage, forced to endure hardship while her husband grew bitter and dependent. Her voice was smooth, rehearsed, dripping with false sympathy. She even dabbed her client's tears at one point, a performance worthy of the stage. When it was my turn, I rose slowly. Every step echoed in the courtroom. "Your Honor," I began, "this case isn't about love lost. It's about greed. It's about betrayal. And it's about a woman who believed that money could buy her freedom at the expense of another person's dignity." Anna scoffed, but I ignored her. "For years," I continued, "my son worked tirelessly, building a life, a home, a future for his family. That future was destroyed not by fate, but by deliberate negligence and deceit. And when he was at his weakest, instead of compassion, he was met with cruelty. "This isn't merely a divorce, Your Honor. It's an attempt to erase responsibility." I let the silence linger after that. You could almost hear Clara's heartbeat from across the room. The first witnesses were called friends, neighbors, even Ethan's former co-workers. Some spoke kindly of Clara. Others hesitated, afraid to take sides. But every time Anna tried to lead them into rehearsed answers, I countered calmly, asking the questions she didn't want asked. My voice didn't need to rise. Precision was far deadlier than volume. Then came the moment. Clara didn't expect the moment I introduced the evidence Thomas had gathered. "Your Honor," I said, placing a folder on the table, "these are financial statements linking Mrs. Torres to William Harris, owner of Harris Construction, the company responsible for the site where my son was injured. These transfers prove a relationship beyond friendship, as well as shared financial interests." Anna jumped to her feet. "Objection? Relevance?" I looked directly at the judge. "Relevance, Your Honor, is motive. It shows intent to abandon a disabled spouse while benefiting from the very man whose negligence caused his injury. That's not coincidence. That's conspiracy." Gasps filled the room. Clara's face drained of color. Judge Morales leaned forward, his expression unreadable. "Overruled. Proceed." I could feel Clara's eyes burning into me, but I didn't look her way. I continued, methodical, relentless. Each document, each photo, each bank record layered the truth like bricks in a wall. Then came the recording. I pressed play on a small device, and Clara's voice filled the room. "Sweetheart, tomorrow at court, you'll tell them you don't want to live with Daddy, okay? You'll say Grandma told you he's sick." Lily's tiny voice followed, trembling. "But Mommy, I love Daddy. I don't want to lie." And then Clara's cold reply. "Do you want to lose everything? Just do as I say." When the recording ended, the courtroom was silent. You could have heard a pin drop. Clara turned pale, her eyes darting wildly. That's not fabricated?" I asked softly. "Your own voice says otherwise." Anna tried to speak, but the judge held up a hand. His gaze was fixed on Clara now, and for the first time, it wasn't sympathy I saw there, it was disgust. Ethan looked down, tears streaking his face, his body shaking with emotion. I wanted to reach for his hand, but I stayed still. This wasn't over yet. When recess was called, the courtroom erupted in whispers. Reporters scrambled for the hallway. I remained seated, calm. Clara stormed out, her heels clicking like gunshots. During the break, Judge Morales approached me quietly. "You never change, Margaret," he said under his breath. "Still fighting battles no one else will." I met his gaze. "Someone has to." He nodded slowly. "You know, the last time I saw you, you were the best damn attorney in Chicago. I wondered why you disappeared." "I didn't disappear," I said quietly. "I was buried." He looked as if he wanted to say more, but didn't. He simply nodded again and returned to the bench. When court resumed, Anna tried one last desperate move, an emotional plea. She spoke of love, of redemption, of second chances. But every word felt hollow now. When she called Clara to the stand, I could almost see the cracks forming. Clara tried to cry, to play the part she'd rehearsed. But under questioning, her mask slipped. I watched her crumble piece by piece. Her hands shook when I asked, "Did you ever tell your daughter to lie in court?" She hesitated. I might have. I was scared." "Scared?" I said softly. "Of what?" "The truth?" She glared at me, eyes blazing. "Of losing everything." The words hung in the air like confession. I leaned closer, my voice cold. "You lost everything the moment you decided money mattered more than love." The courtroom was silent again. Even Anna looked away. When it was over, the judge called for closing statements the next morning. I gathered my papers, calm as still water. As I walked past Clara, she whispered, "You think you've won, old woman? You have no idea who you're dealing with. I stopped, turning to meet her eyes. I know exactly who I'm dealing with, and so does everyone else now. Her smirk faltered. That night, I sat on the porch again, the same spot where Ethan once watched the sunset in silence. The wind carried the faint hum of the city cars, laughter, life moving on. I could see the lights of the courthouse glowing faintly in the distance. Tomorrow, it would all end, one way or another. I thought about the years I had spent running from who I was, about the guilt I'd carried for not saving myself back then. But standing up for my son, standing in that courtroom again, it felt like redemption. Not the kind that comes from forgiveness, but the kind you earn by facing the fire. The next morning, before leaving for court, I checked on Lily. She was asleep, clutching a small teddy bear. I kissed her forehead and whispered, "It's almost over, sweetheart. You'll never have to lie again." As I closed the door behind me, I felt something inside me settle, not peace, not yet, but strength. The kind that only comes when you've already lost everything and have nothing left to fear. Tomorrow would bring judgment, but I had already made mine. The next day, the air inside the courthouse was heavier than ever. It clung to the skin, thick with tension and whispers. I could feel every eye on me as I walked in the woman who had turned a simple divorce into a spectacle of betrayal and truth. The story had already spread. By morning, the local papers were full of it. Former attorney returns after 20 years to defend disabled son, exposes shocking affair and fraud. I should have felt victorious. Instead, all I felt was exhaustion. Victories in court are never clean. They bleed. They bruise. Ethan sat quietly beside me, his fingers fidgeting with the edge of his sleeve. "Mom," he whispered, "thank you. I don't know what I'd have done without you." I placed a hand over his. "You don't have to thank me, Ethan. I'm your mother. This is what I do. I protect what's mine." He gave me a small, tired smile. "She's not done, though. I can feel it." He was right. When Clara walked in, she looked different. Gone was the fake remorse, the trembling lips. She wore black now, sleek, deliberate. Her hair was pinned tight, her chin lifted high. She looked like a woman who'd spent the night plotting revenge. And I knew that look too well. I'd seen it before on men who'd lost everything but still had one card left to play. Her lawyer, Anna Reeves, trailed behind her, clutching a new folder. I could tell by the set of her jaw that she wasn't finished fighting. She had something planned. When the judge entered, the courtroom fell silent once more. "We'll proceed with closing arguments," he said. "But before we do, Miss Reeves, I understand you've filed a motion?" Anna stood, her voice crisp, confident. "Yes, Your Honor. We've come into possession of new evidence that questions the credibility of opposing counsel, Mrs. Hale." A murmur spread through the room like a gust of wind. Ethan turned to me, panic flashing in his eyes. I didn't move. Judge Morales frowned. "Proceed." Anna opened her folder and pulled out a series of papers. "Your Honor, we've uncovered documentation regarding Mrs. Hale's disbarment 20 years ago, an incident involving judicial misconduct and alleged evidence tampering." Oh, my heart didn't race. It stopped. The room buzzed with whispers, reporters scribbling furiously. Clara smiled, a slow, poisonous smile. Judge Morales adjusted his glasses. "Is this accurate, Mrs. Hale?" I rose slowly, meeting his gaze. "Partially, Your Honor. I wasn't disbarred. I resigned before charges were filed. The accusations were unfounded." Anna's tone was sharp as a blade. "Convenient timing, wouldn't you say? To walk away before an investigation?" I took a breath, steady but heavy. "Convenient? No. Necessary. My husband at the time was involved in a bribery scheme. He used my name, my firm, and my cases to cover his tracks. When I found out, I turned him in. The backlash destroyed my reputation. I left the law because I couldn't bear to see my name tied to his corruption." Silence blanketed the courtroom. Even Anna hesitated. Judge Morales nodded slightly. "I remember that case," he murmured. "It was tragic. Mrs. Hale was never found guilty of wrongdoing." Still, Clara seized her chance. "So you admit, Your Honor, that she carries a stain on her record. How can someone like that claim to stand for justice now?" I turned toward her slowly, my voice cold. "You know, Clara, the difference between you and me is that I paid for someone else's sins. You're still busy committing your own." Her smile wavered, but she pressed on. "The truth is, Your Honor, this woman has been manipulating everyone, her son, this court, even you. She's here for revenge, not justice." I stepped forward, each word deliberate. "If I wanted revenge, Mrs. Torres, I'd have ruined you quietly. No courtroom, no witnesses, no paperwork, just silence. But that's not what I want. I want the truth recorded, printed, and judged under the law you thought you could twist." The judge raised a hand. "Enough. I've heard both sides. We'll reconvene tomorrow for closing arguments and a decision." As his gavel fell, the air seemed to fracture. Clara's gaze met mine across the room, a battle of wills in silence. She didn't blink, neither did I. After court, reporters swarmed the hallway. Microphones, cameras, flashes. They wanted sound bites, drama, tears. I gave them none. I walked past, silent, Ethan close behind. But as we reached the exit, Clara's voice sliced through the noise. "Must be nice hiding behind your son's crutch, Margaret," she shouted. "Maybe next time. Bring your husband's ghost, too." Gasps erupted. I stopped, turning slowly. "You're right, Clara," I said softly, my tone steady as ice. "My husband's ghost still lingers in every corrupt deal you and your lover made, and he's watching you burn." Her smirk faltered. Outside, the sky had turned dark with approaching rain. The first drops hit my face as we reached the car. Ethan leaned against the door, exhausted. "Mom, what if they believe her? About your past?" I took a deep breath. "Then I'll tell them the whole truth. I'm not ashamed of the scars that made me. She is." That night, sleep wouldn't come. I sat by the window, listening to the thunder roll across the city. Every flash of lightning illuminated the storm clouds gathering above, and I couldn't help but think maybe the sky was mirroring what was about to happen inside that courtroom. Around midnight, my phone rang. It was Thomas. "Margaret," he said, voice low. "We've got a problem." I tensed. "What kind of problem?" "Clara's trying to bribe one of the witnesses, a man named Reed, one of the inspectors from Harris Construction. She's offering him cash to change his statement before tomorrow." I stood, heart pounding now. "Can you prove it?" "I'm working on it," he said. "But if she succeeds, the case could tilt in her favor. She's desperate, and desperate people are dangerous." I didn't sleep the rest of the night. Instead, I waited pacing the kitchen, every tick of the clock louder than the last. By dawn, Thomas called again. "Got her," he said simply. "We've got the recording. She met Reed in a parking garage, offered him money to lie. Everything's on tape." Relief flooded through me, sharp and bittersweet. "Bring it to the courthouse," I told him. "It ends today." When morning came, I walked into court calmer than I had ever been. Clara sat rigid at the table, dark circles under her eyes, tapping her nails against the wood. She knew something had shifted. I could feel her unease from across the room. Judge Morales looked weary. "Let's conclude this," he said. I stood. "Your Honor, before closing statements, I'd like to submit new evidence." Anna frowned. "Your Honor, this is highly irregular." He cut her off. "I'll allow it." I handed him the flash drive Thomas had delivered minutes before. "This is an audio recording of Mrs. Torres meeting with a city inspector, offering him payment to alter testimony." The judge pressed play. Clara's voice filled the room again, lower, desperate this time. I just need you to say you don't remember the wiring, all right? I'll pay double if you keep your mouth shut. The inspector's voice followed. This is illegal, Mrs. Torres. Her reply. Then consider it a bonus. Oh. The sound stopped. Silence followed. Clara's face went white. That's a setup. You're framing me. I didn't move. Funny. That's what you said about your last recording, too. The judge rubbed his temple, clearly done with the charade. I've heard enough. Both parties will return tomorrow for my ruling. Until then, Mrs. Torres, I suggest you prepare yourself. When the session adjourned, Clara didn't speak. She stood abruptly and left, her heels echoing like distant gunfire. Anna followed her, visibly shaken. Ethan turned to me, eyes wide. Mom? How did you? Old habits, I said softly. And good friends. That evening, I found myself outside again, the wind colder than before. The city lights flickered below the clouds, 1,000 tiny promises in the dark. For the first time, I allowed myself to breathe. But the fight had changed me. I wasn't the same woman who had walked into that courthouse days ago, uncertain and afraid. I was the woman I used to be, sharp, relentless, dangerous in her calm. Still, a whisper of doubt lingered. Justice wasn't always predictable. People lied, twisted, turned truth into illusion. I had seen it happen before. But this time, I was ready. When I finally went inside, I found Ethan asleep on the couch. Lily curled up beside him, her small hand resting over his chest. Watching them, I felt a warmth bloom beneath the cold armor I'd worn all week. They were safe for now. I leaned down, brushing a strand of hair from Lily's face. Tomorrow, I whispered, we end this. Then I straightened, turned off the light, and let the house fall silent once more. Outside, the storm broke, rain pouring against the windows in waves. Not as a warning this time, but as a cleansing. Something was about to be washed away. The final day of the trial dawned gray and windless, as if the city itself had paused to watch what would happen. I woke before sunrise, sitting by the window as the first light crawled across the skyline. My hands were steady now, my heart beat calm. The woman who'd trembled on the first day of court no longer existed. I wasn't here to survive anymore. I was here to finish what I started. When we arrived, the courthouse steps were already crowded. Reporters, curious strangers, even old colleagues I hadn't seen in decades. They called out my name, cameras flashing, voices overlapping. Mrs. Hale, did you expect this outcome? Do you think Clara Torres will face charges? Is it true you're reinstating your license permanently? I didn't answer. I walked straight through them, one hand on Ethan's arm, the other clutching my old briefcase. My silence said everything that words couldn't. Inside, the courtroom was colder than ever. The fluorescent lights flickered faintly, humming overhead. It smelled faintly of coffee, wood polish, and fear. Clara sat at her table, her face pale, lips pressed so tightly they looked bloodless. The arrogance she once carried like perfume had evaporated. She was shaking, though she tried to hide it by keeping her chin high. Anna Reeves sat beside her, but something in her demeanor had changed too. Her confidence had cracked. She didn't meet my eyes anymore. Her hands fidgeted with her pen, and when the judge entered, she avoided standing too quickly, like guilt was suddenly heavy on her shoulders. Judge Morales took his seat, his tone grave. This court will now deliver its judgment in the case of Hale versus Torres. The air went still. Ethan's fingers tightened around his crutch. I could hear the faint squeak of someone's shoe on the polished floor, then nothing else. The judge began slowly, his voice deliberate. Over the past week, this court has witnessed both pain and perseverance. We've seen the dissection of a marriage, the exposure of deceit, and the power of truth no matter how long it takes to emerge. He glanced at me briefly before continuing. Mrs. Torres, The evidence presented against you, including financial records, recordings, and witness testimony, clearly demonstrates attempts to manipulate both this court and your family. Your actions were not those of a victim, but of an opportunist. You sought personal gain through corruption and deception. Clara's knuckles turned white as she gripped the edge of the table. The judge's tone deepened. Therefore, it is the ruling of this court that full custody of the minor child, Lily Hale, be awarded to Mr. Ethan Hale. Furthermore, due to proven misconduct, Mrs. Torres's claim to shared property and spousal support is hereby denied. The matter of potential criminal charges for bribery and evidence tampering will be referred to the district attorney's office. Gasps filled the courtroom. A sound, half sob, half groan, escaped from Clara's throat. The judge looked toward me. Mrs. Hale, your composure and precision during these proceedings have reminded this court of what justice once looked like. You have my respect. I inclined my head. Thank you, Your Honor. Then his gavel struck. One sharp, echoing sound, the end of a war. Clara stood abruptly, eyes wild, her voice cracking through the silence. You can't do this. You can't take everything from me. Judge Morales didn't even look at her. Bailiff. The officer stepped forward, but Clara pushed past him, turning her fury on me. You think you've won, Margaret? She hissed. You'll regret this. You destroyed my life. I rose slowly, calm as still water. No, Clara. You destroyed your own life. I just stopped you from taking ours with you. Her face twisted with rage. You think you're some kind of hero? No. I said softly. I'm a mother. That's far more dangerous. The bailiff led her away, her voice echoing down the hall, curses, pleas, broken fragments of denial. I didn't follow her with my eyes. Some people are better left in the past, where they belong. When I finally turned to Ethan, he wasn't looking at Clara. He was looking at me. Tears streamed down his face, quiet and unrestrained. Mom, I don't know how to thank you. I smiled faintly. You already did, Ethan, by surviving. He laughed through his tears, shaking his head. I don't deserve you. I brushed a hand against his cheek. You don't have to. You're my son. That's enough. Lily ran into the room then, slipping past the guard, her little shoes squeaking on the tile. Daddy, she cried. Ethan bent down, and she threw her arms around his neck, clinging to him. Can we go home now? He nodded, unable to speak. I watched them, my heart finally unclenching. For the first time in years, peace didn't feel like a dream. It felt real. As they embraced, Judge Morales approached me quietly. You know, he said, voice low, I meant what I said. Watching you in court reminded me why I joined the bench in the first place. I smiled softly. Then maybe it was worth coming back. He looked thoughtful for a moment, then asked, Will you stay? Practice again? I hesitated. My eyes drifted to Ethan and Lily, still holding on to each other like lifelines. No, I said finally. I've already won the only case that matters. He nodded, extending his hand. Then let me say this. Welcome back, even if only for a moment. We shook hands, and for the first time in decades, I felt the kind of closure I thought I'd never get. Outside, the reporters were waiting again, microphones raised, flashes blinding. Mrs. Hale, how does it feel to win? Do you have a message for women like you? I paused on the courthouse steps, feeling the wind on my face. Tell them, I said clearly, that silence isn't strength. Sometimes you have to raise your voice even if it shakes. They erupted in more questions, but I was already walking away. Ethan and Lily followed close behind. The three of us moved through the crowd like ghosts leaving a battlefield. The drive home was quiet. Rain started to fall again, soft and rhythmic, tapping against the windshield like a lullaby. Lily hummed quietly in the back seat. Ethan stared out the window, his expression distant but peaceful. When we reached the house, he stopped me at the door. "Mom," he said, "I want you to know something. You didn't just save me. You reminded me who I was, who I still am." I placed a hand on his arm, feeling the strength there, fragile but real. "Then promise me you'll never let anyone take that from you again." "I promise," he whispered. Inside, the house felt different, lighter, as if it too had been holding its breath for years and could finally exhale. The silence wasn't oppressive anymore. It was gentle, healing. I walked through each room slowly, the kitchen, the hall, the living room, remembering all the nights of fear and doubt. Now they felt like shadows fading in the morning sunday. Later, as the evening settled in, I stood by the window again. Across the garden, the old oak tree swayed in the wind, its branches heavy with rain. It had seen everything: the pain, the betrayal, the long nights. But it was still standing. So was I. Ethan joined me, holding a cup of tea. "You know," he said quietly, "Lily asked me if Grandma's a superhero." I laughed softly. "What did you tell her?" "I told her no, that Grandma's just someone who doesn't give up." I smiled, my chest tightening in that bittersweet way love often does. "That's close enough." Outside, the rain slowed, then stopped entirely. The clouds began to part, revealing a thin sliver of sunlight on the horizon. It wasn't bright, but it was enough. For the first time in so long, I allowed myself to cry, not from sorrow, not from anger, but from release. The tears fell quietly, cleansing years of bitterness I hadn't realized I was still carrying. And as I stood there, watching the world begin again, I thought of all the women like me, women who'd been silenced, dismissed, underestimated, women who'd buried their power out of love or fear. I wished I could tell each of them what I had finally learned: that even after everything, there's always a way to stand back up. The past may shape us, but it doesn't own us. When the night finally fell, I turned off the lights, the house settling into a peaceful hush. I whispered a quiet prayer, not for revenge, not for victory, but for peace. Tomorrow, the world would keep turning. But tonight, in this small corner of it, justice had finally come home. Peace never comes quietly. It sneaks in on trembling feet, fragile as glass, and sometimes it breaks before you can even hold it. 2 weeks had passed since the verdict. The house was quiet again, the kind of quiet that didn't ache anymore. Ethan had begun working part-time at an architectural firm, designing accessibility projects for injured workers. It was small work, but it gave him purpose. Lily was back in school, her laughter echoing through the halls like music that healed old wounds. As for me, I had gone back to the garden. I spent mornings trimming roses, afternoons reading in the sunlight. The days felt longer, softer. The air didn't taste like fear anymore, but the peace was short-lived. It started with a letter, no return address, the handwriting sharp, deliberate. It arrived on a rainy Thursday morning. I almost didn't open it, but something about the way my name was written made my skin prickle. Inside was a single sentence, scrawled in dark ink. "You took everything from me. Now I'll take it back." No signature, but I didn't need one. I could almost hear her voice whispering through the paper, venomous, cold, unbroken. "Clara, I should have called the police. I should have told Ethan. But I didn't. Something in me knew this was mine to finish." That night, I double-checked the locks, though I didn't really believe they'd stop her. The storm outside howled against the windows, wind clawing at the shutters. I sat by the living room window, lights dimmed, the briefcase open beside me, my old files, my evidence, the scars of what we'd survived. Around midnight, I heard it, the soft crunch of gravel outside. Footsteps. I didn't move. The motion light flicked on, casting a harsh white glow across the yard. For a moment, I saw nothing, only the empty driveway and the oak tree swaying in the wind. Then a shadow moved near the porch. My pulse stayed steady. Fear, I'd learned, was only useful if you could control it. I reached into the drawer beside me, my fingers closing around the small revolver my late husband had kept locked away for decades. I'd never fired it. But that night, I wasn't planning to miss. The doorknob turned slowly. Once, twice, then stopped. "Clara," I said softly into the dark, my voice steady. "If you're going to come in, stop wasting time." There was silence. Then a faint laugh, bitter, broken. The door creaked open, and she stepped inside, drenched from the rain. Her once glossy hair hung limp, mascara streaking down her cheeks. Her eyes were wild, red from crying or madness. I couldn't tell which. "Margaret," she breathed. "You ruined me." "No," I said, keeping my hand near the drawer. "You ruined yourself. I just made sure everyone saw it." She stepped closer, trembling. "They froze my accounts. Harris cut me off. The press, they won't leave me alone." "I have nothing." Her voice cracked, desperate. "You don't understand what it's like to lose everything." I stood slowly, the old floor creaking beneath me. "Don't I?" Her eyes flickered with recognition, that moment when you see the truth and wish you hadn't. "You don't remember who I used to be?" I said quietly. "Before Ethan was born, before all of this, I lost my husband to greed, my career to betrayal. I built everything again from ashes, and you thought you could burn it down." She flinched, but didn't move back. "Then you know why I can't stop. I can't live with what you did." "You mean what you did?" Her eyes darted toward the drawer too late. I already had the revolver in my hand, not pointed, just resting at my side. The weight of it made the air thicker, heavier. "Clara," I said softly, "if you came here to beg, you're wasting your breath. If you came here to threaten me, you're already dead in every way that matters." Her lip trembled, but her voice rose, raw with hatred. "You think you can scare me with that old gun?" I tilted my head. "No, you've already scared yourself." For a moment, she seemed to crumble, shoulders shaking, tears streaking fresh paths through the makeup. She looked less like a villain now, and more like a wounded animal, cornered and terrified. She dropped her purse to the floor, the sound echoing in the room. A knife slipped out, small, silver, shaking in her hand. "Put it down," I said quietly. Her eyes darted wildly. "You destroyed me," she screamed. "You think I'll let you walk away clean?" She lunged. The sound was deafening. A flash, a crack, then silence. For a long moment, I couldn't move. Smoke curled from the revolver. The knife clattered to the floor, spinning once before stopping. Clara collapsed, clutching her shoulder, crying out in pain. The bullet had missed her heart by choice. Ethan's footsteps thundered down the stairs, his face pale as he took in the scene. "Mom, what did you—" "She came at me," I said quietly, my voice unnervingly calm. "Call the police." He did, trembling. Lily's frightened cries echoed from upstairs, and my heart cracked hearing it. But I didn't regret what I'd done. Not yet. When the police arrived, I gave my statement with precision, every detail, every word. Clara was taken to the hospital under custody, her face pale, her eyes vacant. I watched as they led her away, the rain still pouring outside. The officer, a young man with kind eyes, turned to me. "Ma'am, it was self-defense. You did what you had to do." I nodded, though my voice caught. "That's what I've been doing all along." The house was quiet again after they left. Ethan sat beside me, holding my hand. "Mom, are you okay?" I looked at him, really looked at him, the worry, the fear, the exhaustion etched into his face. "I'm fine," I said softly. "I'm just tired of fighting." He squeezed my hand. It's over now. But he was wrong. It wasn't over. Not yet. The next morning, the district attorney called. Clara had confessed to everything: the bribery, the fraud, even conspiring with Harris to manipulate the injury report from Ethan's accident. Harris was arrested that same day. The papers exploded with it. The fall of a tycoon, the scandal of a socialite, the redemption of a forgotten lawyer. They called me the Iron Widow. The title made me laugh. I'd never wanted fame, only peace. Weeks passed. The hearings ended. The investigations closed. Clara was sentenced to 12 years in prison. When I saw her one last time in the courthouse hallway, she didn't look angry anymore, just hollow. As the guards led her away, she turned to me. "Why didn't you kill me?" she whispered. I paused, then said quietly, "Because that would have been mercy." Her eyes filled with tears. And then she was gone. After that day, the world felt lighter, quieter, in a different way. I spent my mornings baking again, humming songs I hadn't sung in years. Ethan smiled more. Lily drew pictures of our family with bright colors. The shadows that used to cling to the corners of the house had finally lifted. But some nights, when the wind blew through the trees, I'd still think of Clara, of how easily people could lose themselves chasing something they didn't deserve. I didn't pity her, but I understood her in a way that scared me. We were two sides of the same coin, both women broken by the world, both willing to fight back. The only difference was what we were fighting for. One evening, I took Lily to the garden. The oak tree shimmered under the sunset, its leaves glowing gold. She pointed up and said, "Grandma, is that where angels live?" I smiled faintly. "Maybe," I said. "But some angels don't live up there, sweetheart. Some walk right here, watching over us." She giggled. "Like you?" I paused. "No, Lily, I'm not an angel. I'm just someone who's learned not to run anymore." That night, as I watched the moon rise, I realized something. Revenge isn't always fire and fury. Sometimes it's the quiet satisfaction of surviving, of walking away when they expected you to break. And though I'd sworn never to set foot in a courtroom again, I knew one thing for certain. If anyone ever tried to hurt my family again, I'd be ready. Because once you've faced hell, even the devil learns to fear you. People think justice is about punishment, about winning. But after everything I've lived through, I've learned it's something quieter, something smaller. Justice is the moment you can look in the mirror and finally recognize yourself again. For years, I thought silence was strength. That if I endured long enough, if I stayed polite enough, the world would eventually treat me kindly. But kindness isn't something you wait for. It's something you fight for. Sometimes that means standing alone in a courtroom when everyone doubts you. Sometimes it means walking away from the ashes of your own life and daring to start again. When I look at my son now, I see the boy who once fell but chose to rise anyway. I see my granddaughter's laughter, light, untamed, free. And I see the reflection of a woman who finally stopped apologizing for surviving. To anyone listening, maybe you've been betrayed. Maybe you've been silenced, underestimated, or told that your best years are behind you. Don't believe them. You are not defined by what they did to you. You are defined by how you rise after it. Forgiveness isn't forgetting. It's freedom. It's choosing to stop carrying the fire that once burned you. Revenge might give you satisfaction for a moment, but truth lasts. So if you're standing in your own storm right now, remember, these storms don't last. But you do. You've already survived worse than you think. And one day, when the clouds clear, you'll realize that surviving wasn't the end of your story. It was the beginning. This was mine. And if my story has reached you tonight, if it reminded you of your own strength, your own fire, then stay with me. Because there are so many stories left to tell, stories of resilience, of courage, of ordinary people who refuse to be broken. You're not alone in this fight. You never were. And if you've ever felt invisible, then maybe this is your sign to stand back up and be seen again.